afternoon and welcome to the Metropolitan Campus in Cuyahoga Community College. I'm Michael Scope, and on behalf of our Board of Trustees and our President, Dr. Jerry Sue Thornton, I am pleased to play host to this City Club in the City to explore the topic of how to walk to school. And to tell us a little bit about that is Ms. Jacqueline Edelberg. Jacqueline Edelberg has been the driving force behind the Nettlehorse School dramatic turnaround, a story that's been featured on Oprah and Friends, NPR, CNN, Education Weekly, and in local Chicago media. A community organizer, writer, and nationally recognized fine artist, Jacqueline's led workshops for the Community Schools Initiative, Northside's Parents Network, and Chicago Public Schools on how public schools and reformers can galvanize communities to improve public education. She's consulted with schools and neighborhood groups on issues of strategy and organizational development. Before devoting herself to art, community organizing, and cutting off crusts of bread, Jacqueline taught political science at the University of Ravensbrück in Germany as a Fulbright scholar. She earned her bachelor's degree and doctorate from the University of Chicago. Her book, How to Walk to School, was endorsed by Rahm Emanuel, the President's Chief of Staff, and Secretary of Education Arne Duncan, who wrote the foreword. The American Library Association wrote, "Every parent and teacher in America should read this book, and so should you." How to Walk to School with Miss Jacqueline Edelberg.
Hi, so first of all, thank you so much to Dr. Scope and the Tri-State staff and students and the Tri-C Foundation and of course Eric Gordon and above all else the City Club for hosting me. So thank you so much for inviting me out. So I thought what I would do is just give you an overview of our story and then I'm going to show a really short video about it, and then we'll have a rather forthright Q&A where I'll try to address some of the questions that you might have. So here's the short story. My husband was supposed to do all of the research on schools. I have to go this way, but I have a mic. No? Okay, so I'll stand right here. So my husband was supposed to do all of the research on schools. And in Chicago, that's a really, really big project. Trying to get your kid into a private school in Chicago is pretty damn near impossible. And even if you can get in, you know, good luck being able to eat out ever again or go on vacation or pay for college or anything else you might want to do in life. And trying to get your kid into a reputable magnet school is just as daunting. In fact, it is statistically easier to get your high school senior into Harvard than it is to get your kindergartner into one of Chicago's established magnet schools. So this was a really big project, and I said, oh my God, you cannot drop this in my lap. This is huge. And I had a 2.5-year-old at the time, and I was pregnant with my second. And he said, well, you're not working right now. Why don't you go make yourself useful, go figure it out. So I thought, oh, all right, fine. So my girlfriend in the park and I decided we should check out Nettlehurst, which was our neighborhood school, and see just how terrible this school was before we panicked or went down this public-private school path or moved out to the suburbs. I mean, I would rather eat glass than move to the suburbs. So the thought was maybe we should check it out and see just how bad it is, so at least we could cross it off the list. And the principal, Susan Kurland, showed us around for 3 hours. And she said, what do I have to do to get your kids to come to school here? And we said, well, that's very interesting. We'll come back tomorrow and we'll let you know. So we went home and we parked our kids in front of Dora the Explorer and we cracked open a bottle of wine and we started rifling through my friend's big stack of glossy promo materials from the private schools in Chicago, and we cobbled together a wish list. And we came back the next day with this 5-page typewritten list of all the things that we felt would have to be in place in order to make a neighborhood walk in en masse. And Susan read our list, and she said, well, let's get going, girls. It's going to be a very busy year. So we organized, and we talked to all these mommies in the park, and we put them all into teams, and we had infrastructure and PR and curriculum and marketing and enrichment, and all of those teams had to succeed concurrently in order to make the project work. We knew we couldn't fix the library one year and then say, well, next year we'll deal with the enrichment piece, and maybe 2 years from now we'll kind of figure out that whole fundraising part. So we knew all of those teams had to work. And we'd say to moms in the park, what did you do before you were in nothing? And they'd say, oh, I was the ad exec for Gatorade. I was a partner at Scout and Orp. I'm a makeup artist. I'm a this, I'm a that. It was all these creative, really cool things. And we thought, well, instead of talking about what's on sale at the Gap and all, as intriguing as that is, maybe so long as we're all stuck around this, well, not stuck, happily sitting around the sandbox for the next 8 hours, maybe we could figure out how to fix this place so that we all could just go to school here. And then we could all be friends for the next 8 years, and then we'll figure out that high school piece later, but we could stay in the neighborhood that I love. I live in East Lakeview in Chicago, which is Boys Town, which I've been told is a lot like the Tremont neighborhood here. Yep. In Cleveland, it's eclectic and it's cool and it's funky and I love my hood, and the thought of leaving it would make me really, really sad. So we put all of these mommies onto teams, and by all lights, we figured that we had 9 months to pull it off. We figured we had 9 months because we walked in the summer, and we knew that everybody was going to get rejected from magnet schools and private schools by spring. And when that happened, Nettlehurst would have to be somewhere in that panic suicide folder by spring, because if it weren't, then everybody would make other plans for themselves, because nobody would wait around until September to see what happened. So, which is not to say that Nettlehurst wouldn't have changed 10, 15 years down the road, or even next year, who knows, it might have, but it certainly wasn't going to change with this group of women who were in the park. So, how bad was Nettlehurst really? Let me give you, I think by most people's standards, they would say it was a perfectly fine Chicago public school. Let me walk you through the timeline. Susan Kurland, our principal, had been there for 2 years. So in the 10 years before Susan was there had been 7 different administrators in 10 years. And right before she got there, the board had assigned 2 principals to get the school under control. It was entirely bussed in from overcrowded schools, not to satisfy any racial mandate. It's just that the neighborhood refused to go to school there. So they bussed kids in from overcrowded schools, and every day 14 buses pulled up taking kids from 7 different locations. There was a 50% mobility rate because every year those schools would pull students back based on what their demographics needed. And I think it is safe to say that the school that Susan inherited really was one of those Morgan Freeman kind of chaos on a plate schools. But Susan really did bring order to the school. She rode the buses. She really, really worked very, very hard. And I think most people would have said, this is okay. This is not terrible. But it certainly wasn't at a place, test scores were in the 30s. It certainly wasn't the kind of a place where anybody who had other options would choose it. In fact, of the 300 kids who lived in my neighborhood who chose a Chicago public school, not one of them chose Nettlehurst.